The thing with wickets is, because it's an environmental constraint on where you put your foot down and you've measured out consistent distances, it makes it easier to tune your brain to what it's like to keep going in a consistent rhythm. What's up everybody, Cody Bidlow with sprintingworkouts.com and ATHLETE.X. Today, doing a little bit different workout. I got some wickets set up, well they're cones, but we're using them as wickets because I want to play around with stride length and stride frequency a little bit. I don't know that I'll glean any useful information out of it, but figure it's a good way to mix up the training session, give my brain a slightly different challenge, and we'll see how it goes. So to get these set up, I've got a tape measure over there by where my water bottle is, and I have that run all the way along the track. And basically all you got to do is you calculate, you start it at 0, you put your first cone or wicket, hurdle, whatever there. And then, like in this case, this zone is 6'10", so from the front of that cone to the front of this cone, that's 6'10". Same for there. And then I go 7 feet for the rest of them. Now you could get creative and add an inch each zone or an inch each couple zones, or play around with that so you have sort of a progressive increase in stride length as you do the whole sprint. But since I haven't been doing these lately, I'm keeping it simple and just trying 2 different variations. But you're welcome to change it up and adjust things as needed based on what you feel is good, what gets you the best times, what feels the best, and then you can take note of that. And after a few trial runs, a few practices kind of figuring things out, you'll then have a better idea of what your go-to distances are. And from there, you can set up your practices and track things and do all that. Basically, I've run 4 sprints so far. The first 2, I went 6'10" between every zone, and that was from 20 to 50 meters. Over the course of that, I decided, okay, I'm gonna leave the first 2 zones at 6'10", but lengthen out the rest of them to 7 foot and extend my acceleration. So on the 3rd rep, I went a 25 meter accel, and then on the 4th rep, I went a 30 meter acceleration, or maybe a little bit shorter, like 27 meters, but pretty close to 30. And so far the times have gotten a little faster each rep, so clearly warming up. I got different spikes on today. I'm wearing my Adidas Prime SPs. I wanted to switch things up, see if I felt better in these compared to the Max Flies. But anyways, people talk about stride frequency as if it's the most important thing ever, and it is really important, but the problem is you can get into a situation where you're cutting off your stride length to favor stride frequency, or you're cutting off your ranges of motion and you're sprinting in an unnatural way because you're trying to be too quick. So with these wickets, I'm not trying to go quicker than I'm capable of. I'm just trying to modify the stimulus to my brain a little bit, see what it feels like to go at different stride lengths, and see how that affects the stride rate. But so far so good. Soon in the workout, I'm going to take the cones out and just do some straight sprints, see what I can get for times. So I'll check in back here in a quick second. All right, so I just ran one without the cones, and it felt pretty good. My acceleration was a little out of control, kind of, I don't know if I was working too hard or just a little bit kind of side-to-side action, especially in my upper body. But after I got through the 40, I ran okay. I ran 0.96 and 0.97, so that's a, let's see, what is that? 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a 193 flying 20 from 40 to 60, so that's not bad. But my 30 to 40 was 1.05, so it was much slower than it should be. So I think my rate of acceleration wasn't quite there, but once I got up and was upright, I ran okay. My best ever for the 40 to 60, I think, is in the 1/8 somewhere. So not a PR, but not way off my PR either. Now, like I said, I am wearing different spikes today, so I don't know if that's making a difference. I came out here and sprinted yesterday. I did basically a very similar workout, really, now that I think of it, but I did flying 30s from 20 to 50. I did a flying 40 from 30 to 70, and then I did some block starts using a weight vest. One thing I found when wearing a weight vest is it kind of forced me to spend a little more time on the ground, get a little bit more out of each push, and not rush the acceleration. Whereas before that, I was trying to be really quick, and my acceleration times just were nowhere near what I'm used to seeing. And so I think, you can sometimes use tools like a sled or a weight vest if you find that someone's rushing. Well, maybe you put a 6 or 8 pound weight vest on, or a light sled, 20 pounds, something like that, and see if they can be a little more patient with their acceleration. I'm not saying you should focus on over pushing and bounding or anything like that when you accelerate, but I just think for some people, emphasizing stride rate is not always the solution. And I know, lately it's been talked a lot on Instagram that stride rate is everything, but that just doesn't tell the whole picture. It might be really useful for some athletes. Maybe some athletes are over pushing and bounding too much in their acceleration, and so they need to work on getting quicker. But other people, maybe they can benefit from having a little more time on the ground, or just not rushing their acceleration and building into high frequency throughout the sprint rather than trying to blast high frequency from the start. So you have to individualize that sort of thing. You can't just make a blanket statement and say, oh, stride rate is everything or stride length is everything, because everybody's going to be in a different situation, and you'll be in a different situation now than you will a year or two from now. You might have to work on stride length this year, but then after you kind of get all that you can out of that, now you have to increase your stride rate to continue to improve or optimize your style of sprinting. So if you see someone say something like, this is the only way to do it, or this is the best, just consider what their biases might be and how that may be true for them or someone they've coached, but it may not be true for you. You should still be open-minded, consider what they have to say and think about it, see if it makes sense, try it out. But it's not always as simple as that. So I ran another 60 from a 3-point stance. Still have the cones out from 30 to 60. Let's see. Most of the splits were pretty average, but I did have one that, according to Free Lap, it was a 0.91. So I went from 40 to 50, I went 0.91, and then from 50 to 60, 1.01. So that's an average of 192. So that's pretty close for the flying 20 compared to the previous rep. Now 0.91 is the fastest I've ever run over a 10-meter split. I've done it once before, but it could be measurement error. For example, maybe when you average it out over the two splits, it really is a 192, but one cone sends you a little bit sooner, and then that puts you a little bit later into the next set of cones. But regardless, the 20-meter segment was pretty good, and it was really close to the previous rep. So I think the 20-meter zone, the 192, and then on the previous one I think was a 193. I believe those are accurate numbers. I'm gonna do one more, and I think that'll be it, just based on how my body feels. I don't want to destroy myself and then next week be kicking myself because I did too much today. But I'm gonna do one more of these, see what I can get in this flying 30 and that last flying 20, and we'll go from there. All right, so did that rep. Similar time over that last 20-meter segment, the 40 to 60, that was a 194. So I had a 0.96 and a 0.98 split, totaling 194. So that means I went 192, 193, 194 today over that flying 20. That tells me that things are going in the right direction, because this is the first day where I really felt like I've been able to actually put my foot down and ramp up the intensity to a max effort sprint, especially in that top speed zone. So I'm pretty satisfied with that. I think it's a good sign for things to come. I just got to stay healthy and keep going, not have major training breaks that set me back or injuries or anything like that. And I think if I just stick with that and can stay consistent, it'll just continue to move in the right direction. So pretty happy about that. But I think the moral of the story today is, for one, you can use wickets or cones or whatever just to kind of tune your brain into a certain frequency that you're trying to hit, a certain consistency you're trying to hit. Because the thing with wickets is, because it's an environmental constraint on where you put your foot down, and you've measured out consistent distances, it makes it easier to tune your brain to what it's like to keep going in a consistent rhythm. Whereas when you're sprinting just in a lane with no environmental constraint, it could be easier to go quicker, slower, kind of open up, shorten up, and have your stride frequency, your stride length, and your overall rhythm be sort of inconsistent. So who knows, maybe running with the cones out at the beginning of my session helped kind of tune me in to a certain rhythm and consistency, which then allowed me to run fast toward the end of the workout. So, you know, maybe it's completely unrelated, but definitely has something to do with either A, the spikes I'm wearing, B, the wickets I did at the beginning, maybe the fact that I sprinted yesterday, you know, potentiated my body for today, so I was in better shape to run fast, because yesterday I felt kind of sluggish, like I just couldn't get my leg through. Basically, I do think that there's some value in doing wickets. It's just, you know, don't think that that's the end-all be-all and that's going to fix everything. Sometimes when people run over wickets, it ruins their form. They lean back, they do the marching band thing, and we don't want that. We want to use wickets with good technique, keeping our posture nice and locked in, bringing our leg forward and then cycling, you know, down and back under us. That's what wickets are for. If you run through them and it messes up your form, then maybe you shouldn't do them. Maybe you should do them at a lower intensity to get used to it, and then it'll help you more over time. But you got to make sure you're maintaining good form when you're running through wickets. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose. Another thing to consider with wickets that I did today was the last 10 meters of the sprint, there were no cones out, no wickets. So that forces you to, or doesn't force you, but what you can do with that is, say you have a 30-meter segment, you have cones or hurdles or whatever out, lines on the ground, whatever you have access to, over the first 20, and then in the last 10, you have nothing. So you're just trying to maintain that rhythm you had built up over the wickets through the last zone. Because if all you ever do is sprint with the wickets and have no run out zone where you're continuing to sprint, but there's no wickets, the issue you're gonna have there is it's gonna be hard to translate that, you know, sprinting pattern that you had when you had the wickets out into a sprint without them. So when you have the majority of the flying zone with wickets and then the last 10 or 20 without, you can then try to transition or have some transfer of the rhythm you're trying to see over wickets in the form, and then you're trying to transfer that into the zone where there's nothing there and it's just you sprinting. I think that's the best way to use them. That way, you know, we're bringing back the context of sprinting without them within the same rep. So you use the cones or wickets to build up your frequency, build your stride rate, stride length, and get that into a zone that you feel is optimal for you. And then from there, you carry that out over a zone without wickets. And then like I did today, then I took them away completely and tried to bring that same feeling I had into the whole sprint without any wickets. And I think when we combine things in that way, just like if you're doing sleds, you don't want to only do sleds, you probably want to do sleds with some sprints. So that way you can take what you're feeling in the sleds and apply it to the sprint. You know, we want to always have that context of what our most sport specific thing is when we're using these training tools or, you know, different styles of sprint training. So, you know, it'd be worth trying it out. Like I said, I started out with 6'10" and went from there. Now, how did I get that number? Well, I looked at what was my stride rate in my last practice, and it was 4.54 hertz. So that's 4.54 steps per second. And I wanted to ramp that up a little bit, or at least change, you know, how many steps I'm taking over 10 meters to see if it had any benefit. So then what I did was I took that 4.54 hertz and multiplied it by 1.05, so increasing it by 5%. And then once I had that number, I took, 10 meters divided by that, which gave me the distance in meters that I would want for each stride to achieve that, you know, 5% increase in stride rate, if we're assuming that our time over the 10 meters is the same, which it wouldn't be. So this is not perfect, but I'm just telling you what I did. I'm not saying this is the way to do it. I'm just telling you my thought process. So I took 4.54 times 1.05, okay? Then 10 divided by that number gave me a certain distance in meters. I converted that to feet, and that gave me 6'10". Then once I ran through 6'10" on 10 zones, which is about 20 meters, then I decided, okay, I'm creeping up on the cones toward the end. I need to be increasing my stride length as I continue to sprint, because your longest stride length is going to be deeper into the race. So then I added a couple inches to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th zones, and I increased 2 inches on each one. and I felt like that was too much. So then I brought it back to where the first 2 zones were 6'10", and then everything else was 7 foot from there. And that's how I finished the wickets. So you can play around with it, but that's at least what I did, so you have some idea of how I came up with the distances, how I implemented them into the workout. And it'll be a work in progress. I'll see how things go over time and adjust accordingly. But for now, that's what I did, and it was a good session overall. So I thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. I know you got other things you got to do, so I really appreciate that you spend some time listening to me talk about sprint training. But until next time, this is Cody Bidlow of SprintingWorkouts.com and ATHLETE.X signing off.